if somebody is doing 70% dry fire to 30% range time, it's like we talk about in our space. If you're doing a lot more bag work, glove drills, mitt work than you are sparring, then you want your bag work, mitt work, glove drills to translate for your sparring. Right? So if I'm doing completely different things and developing completely different habits in the 75% of the time versus the 25%,
right,
it defies logic that those things are going to somehow all of a sudden switch up for me in that 25% of the time.
Welcome to the Second Plan A podcast, where we take hard-earned lessons from the mats and convert them into tools for navigating life's challenges, like him. I'm Amber Hoover. I'd rather stick to the plan.
And I'm Ryan Hoover, and two heads are better than one.
That's an Amber joke right there. Okay.
So you should be happy. This is just another random thing that happens to be in this space for some god-awful reason.
I've got nothing, but it's kind of terrifying. There you go. You're welcome, world. Now you know. So today we are moving on to our second plan A. So that is creepy. On this episode,
you're never gonna make it through this episode.
I'm already I already have so much editing to do. We're not even 2 minutes in.
Why do you have to edit?
I need to cut out all this.
No, you don't.
Okay. On this episode,
do you think people show up to hear what we're talking about?
For this episode, I kind of hope not, because on this episode, we are doing things a little bit different. We're going to talk back and forth about communication, how it exists in the mat space. So let's go. Here you go.
I don't know. I just think it's funny you're talking to me about communication.
So, okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to ask you a lot of things about communication.
All right.
Which is why when you were like, I didn't look at this outline at all, I was like, that's okay. There's nothing really in the outline, because this conversation is going to be our testing, research, jumping off point. And we're counting on you, the viewer, to comment, interact, engage, discuss, and give us some more feedback about common communication questions you have, whether it be from life or from the mats.
Okay.
Great, because I'm going to start us off with a story. I just got back from the No Other Choice Train and Learn event held just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. It's hosted by Kevin Dixie. I think we've mentioned him on the podcast before. Great dude, a lot of fun to be around, holds a great event, had a great time. And I was in the newer group of shooters that they kind of divided us up into levels to put us through these different training sessions that we were going to have. And I really enjoyed that because I was learning the basics, which I love. But I was also trying to watch how the coaches coached, how the instructors taught the information, not just from learning the information standpoint, but to get a feel of different leadership and communication and teaching styles. And so on the pistol course, I was with Chris from FTAC training, and he had asked how everybody was feeling. And there was a generally positive murmur among the group. And then he focused in on one person who happened to be next to me and asked very specifically how she was feeling. And as soon as I looked over, it was like her body language was just a big flashing sign to me of not great. And so I loved that he picked up on that, made sure to check in with her directly, get a read on her, see what was going on. And if he hadn't been paying attention to body language, it's easy to just look at your group, ask if they're doing good, and move on. And there's a time and place to do that, of course. But with a new group of shooters throwing, lead down range, I assume that's maybe not the time to ignore those types of things. So it was really cool to see that, especially because our coach development courses include a lot of reading body language from your students. Cue talking about reading body language from your students.
To read my body language.
Yeah, I always read your body language. We'd never do any podcasts. So no, I'm kidding.
I mean, I think so much of this just comes down to being observant and actually caring about the information that you're taking in. I mean, I don't think there are any special skills necessarily. It's more about intent,
Yeah.
There's body language happening all around us all day, every day. It's just, are we paying attention to it or not? I mean, it's no different than you having a conversation with somebody and them talking and they're saying things, but you're not really listening to what they're saying. I think body language is the same. It's easier to ignore,
Yeah.
but it's the same. I told you a story about being at the gym yesterday, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I had just gotten there and I noticed a young guy, I would say late teens, looks a little lost. And generally, I go and lift and I put in my earbuds like as I'm walking in the door, and it's like head down and I'm going and doing my thing and I'm getting out of there. I might, if the occasion strikes me, I might hit some notes or something in between sets or whatever, but I'm not engaging with anybody.
I have to work really hard to get him to take his earbuds out to listen to me if I want to talk to him while he's lifting.
I am head down and getting things done. But I noticed, I think one thing that stood out is, we're there at a pretty regular time, and there's regular folks in there. Like, there are people that we see every day, and I had never seen him before. And then, so that drew my attention to him initially. And then my immediate feeling was he seemed uncomfortable. And so I literally just went, "You good?" And he hesitated for a second, and he was like, "I've never been here before. Can you show me how to adjust this machine?" And so I went over, adjusted. Well, I asked him what he was trying to do, and I adjusted the machine and kind of went on about my business. And so I'm benching. This is maybe 10 minutes later. And he's moved on to the dual cables where he's doing, we'll call them flies. And I'm watching him, but I'm also watching another guy that's there that I see regularly. And I'm not going to say the things that I think, but because now I've learned that people that come to Anytime actually listen to what we're saying. So I doubt this guy is, but
it's just my friends.
And so I see him pick up one of the accessories for these cable things, and he sits on a bench right next to it. And I immediately know what's about to happen. I know he's about to try to jump in on this kid's workout, which is bothersome for a few reasons. There happens to be a whole other cable machine on the other side of the gym that he could go to. And so I'm watching the body language between him and this kid, and I could tell the kid, he's just very meek. He's in a new place. He doesn't know these people. He doesn't know, I think, the rules, written or unwritten, whatever. And so the kid finishes his set, and the guy has his little bar in his hand, and he just kind of points at one of the cables. The kid's clearly not done, And it's one thing if you're going to work in and you're doing the exact same thing or whatever. So the kid just kind of drops his head and kind of nods like this. So the guy switches out the handle for his handle, and he does 3 sets. And the kid's over there on the other side trying to do single like this. And then he walks off, leaves it the way he set it up for himself. And so a couple minutes later, as I'm getting ready to leave, I walk over to the kid and I'm like, "Hey, man," I said, "this is exactly what I said. Don't let these entitled old fucks run you off from a machine." I said, "Tell them how many sets you've got left. There's plenty of other things that they can do in the room. I can't stand a bully." And the body language was, I'm a bully and I am susceptible to being bullied. And it just bothered me. Well, and I would have said something to the guy if I didn't think it would have made it worse for the kid. If it would have made him more uncomfortable.
There's some unspoken communication within the gym if you're used to that environment where you understand a point at a piece of equipment. And I'm guessing that kid probably didn't. But if you're paying attention, you would know when you need to use words. Like, I know when somebody looks at me, asks me about something, points at a piece of equipment, if I can nod or shake my head, or I need to say, "I have a couple more sets," or "I saw somebody on that machine a couple minutes ago."
This dude knew he wasn't done.
That part, that's
I'm
really bothersome.
The whole interaction. He knew he wasn't done. So anyway, that was my just yesterday body language kind of interaction. And again, I think it just comes down to, are you paying attention? And then if you're paying attention, what are you doing with the information that you're seeing?
I see energy from people by reading body language, but I really start to feel it. I don't know if that's unique to me or women, or am I allowed to say that? Anyway, can you feel it from other people when they're nervous or whatever might be going on with them? You read it and go,
yeah, I don't know.
Understand. All right, cool. Body language is a big one. And again, if you're paying attention, if you care about, from a coach standpoint, if we take this back to the mats, if you care about the people you're teaching and what you're teaching and what your overall goal is, it's important to pay attention to it. You can miss a lot of really big things. And from the self-defense standpoint, if my goal is to make people safer and the people who are coming to me don't feel safe, then I really need to pay attention to how they're feeling in the moment, doing these different movements, having somebody put their hands on their neck so that I can continue to help them come back and give them the space that they need to train in.
Well, and I think especially in what we do, being able to read body language between and among people is important.
Yeah.
I have a lot of teens in my classes, and guess on you. Teen body language is yeah.
From the jump
It's
already.
very demonstrative.
Yeah.
They don't hide how they're feeling very well. I don't know that they're trying to, but they don't. So if you're paying attention, you like I've said this before. There are people that, especially the teens, when they walk in the door, already have a good idea of what kind of energy they're bringing. And then, so as a coach, it's up to me to decide if I'm going to give time to that or not, if I'm going to acknowledge it, or if I think acknowledging it will make it worse.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, watching body language between people, I think is especially important in what we do, because you can see, again, if you're paying attention, you can see when somebody is uncomfortable with somebody else. And it's not always like super overt or obvious. And I would say most of the time it's not. It's just little things here and there that give, the idea that I would rather not partner with this person. And so as a coach, I think it's really important to pay attention to those things. We've talked about this before. It's like the easy part of coaching is the ABCs of what we do.
Move this way, do this thing.
That's
Here's
so
what it looks
simple.
like.
I think we touched on this before. To me, that's the difference between a coach and an instructor or a teacher or whatever. In our sphere, as a coach, I have to be much more in tune with everything going on in the room. As an instructor, my job is to break down this move or movement for you and then let you go do it.
And really not be invested in your process.
It's much more like a college professor who has a room of 300 people.
I was just going to say that because, in an educational setting, they stand at the front of the room, they give you the information, they give you some tools that you can go home and work on things for the information. And then at some point you take a final test, and they maybe care as far as it matters for them and their performance or grading or whatever comes from the metrics of how students do on the test. But really it's on you to put in the effort and get the results.
They're not reading anybody's body language.
No.
You're a sea of just heads, like I think that was the biggest thing for me, was going from, AP English, where I had Miss Sell, who was incredible, amazing, and could have looked around her room of 25 people and known and would have cared if somebody seemed off.
Yeah.
And then going to chemistry class with literally 300 people in the room at NC State, and that professor, he wouldn't have had a clue who was in that room. It's just not set up for that. So I think, and that's the difference too in our world, where if you're teaching a class where you've got 15 people versus teaching a seminar where you've got 100. In a seminar with 100 people, it's much more difficult to get those touches and to get that read for body. I mean, I still try, I'm like a caged tiger. I'm never still when I'm teaching, but it's not the same. So there are limitations to what can be feasibly done based on the context and the environment that you're working in. But still, if you make an effort, you can get closer to having a better understanding of what's going on in the room if you're really just paying attention and care.
So I want to move from, and I say move from it. I'm sure body language will come back around. I think that's such a big one for what we do. But I also want to talk about reading between the lines of sorts, not just hearing what somebody says, but really understanding what they mean. And that has a few different avenues it can take. It might be just what somebody is saying is they're nicely trying to tell you that their partner's going too hard or something like that. But even deeper is something I experienced in one of the small group sessions from the Train and Learn event this weekend, where somebody asked, how do I know when I'm ready to teach people? People went around the room and gave answers, but I sat with that question to really understand what she was saying, especially because this was more of a firearms environment. And I feel like the firearms world does a good job of being like, okay, here's the group you need to be certified under. Here's your certification. Go teach people. And the benefit to that is having a very clear way to say, okay, instructor or not. But the downside is there's not a lot of true validation there. And we just hit on this in the last episode about self-efficacy. She wasn't asking for somebody to tell her she's ready. She was asking for how to develop her self-efficacy, how to believe more in her abilities. And so that comes down, what we know from the last episode, mastery experience is the best way to do it. to successfully teach people and pass on those skills. And of course, there are ways to do that in different stages, but that's reading and understanding what she was saying rather than just listening to the words.
I'm curious if you remember what some of the answers were around this
Yeah.
space.
So more training, which, okay, might build some more of your confidence in your skills to do the thing. She also made the statement, "I'm not a gun girl," which I understand completely. Like, I'm just never going to be that person who knows everything about every gun to give you answers. And so one of her concerns was somebody asking her a question and her not having the answers. And another lady kind of leading the group volunteered, like, "I'm not a gun girl either." And she has her own company. Like, it looks like she's pretty well known in the space. So I was very excited for her about that. But another answer was to research all these guns and this kind of a thing. And so the other side of her concern was being confident in who she is in the space, which you just made a post about recently as well, owning who you are and being confident in that rather than trying to fit some kind of mold or model that you think is supposed to be in the space.
I don't think anybody else can tell you that you're ready to teach.
100%. I mean, they can tell you, but you're not going to own it yourself.
It's a worthless exercise.
Yeah.
You know, I think in a lot of cases, maybe, and I'm not talking about this girl, but maybe people are looking for some validation because it makes you feel more ready or more competent or whatever. But the truth is, I can't give that to you.
Yeah.
You know,
well, it's the idea of feeling versus being. And we talk about that a good bit. Do you want to feel confident? Because I can do that. And almost anyone can do that. Or do you actually want to be confident?
Yeah.
Because that's going to require failure.
Well, that's why, I think for the most part, the fake it till you make it thing is garbage.
Yeah.
You know, like, first of all, people will know if you're faking it.
Yeah.
We're sitting here talking about body language. No matter what words you're saying, it is very difficult to get your body language to match your words if your words aren't what you really
honest
feel.
And true, authentic.
You know?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, because you're either going to way overreact and that's easily readable, or you're not going to be able to up it and that's readable as well. Yeah.
And that's why, you know, in coach courses, I mean, I tell people all the time, look, somebody asks a question you don't know the answer to. I would much rather you say, you know what, that's a good question. I'm not really sure, but I will find out the answer for you. Then you BS something and look, maybe you fool a brand new student, you know, but then also maybe they're in my class next week and they ask me the same question and I give them a very different answer. And then they're like, well, that's not what Amber said at all. I think it's like anything else. You know, you want to get good at teaching, you got to teach. Start small groups, people that you know, people that you trust.
That's, yeah.
Maybe do some apprenticing with somebody. This is kind of how we do it, you know, in our centers, where I'm not just turning over a class to somebody immediately. They're going to help me out. They're going to assist. Maybe I give them a warm up to do. Maybe I give them a drill to run, whatever. And so now they're building actual confidence, faking their way through it.
Yep.
Too. Maybe they find out, you know what, I don't really like this. Or they find out coaching, teaching is the best way to find out if you really understand information or not. Because when you have to take it and get somebody else to do it, you have to, because they're going to ask you questions that you haven't heard before, don't make any sense to you, but make sense to them in their world, their context. And you find out really quickly if you, not if you're just able to regurgitate the information, but if you really understand why something is what it is. Coaching is the best way to get there. But it takes time. And you're going to, just like any other endeavor, you're going to fail some. You're going to say the wrong things. You're going to do the wrong things. You're going to make a demo that doesn't look good. Somebody's going to ask you a question. You're not going to answer it quite correctly. You're going to be clunky about it. Whatever it is, you know, that's just how it goes.
People appreciate honesty so much more than having an encyclopedia of knowledge in front of them.
Yeah,
you know, like you don't have to, you know? You don't have to be everything. And you don't have to be better than your students necessarily either. That you're not, as a coach, you're not saying, I'm the best in here, I'm going to teach you. You're saying, I have the skill sets to transfer knowledge effectively and make you better.
Yeah. I mean, I never walk onto a math thing and I can smash everybody in this room. I mean, it's not, but I think that's the perception a lot of times, you know, that people have. Well, I got to be able to run through everybody in this room.
I feel like maybe once or twice you've done it. Maybe. But yeah.
No, but like, So in this case, with this lady that's asking the question, first of all, just own who you are. This is who I am. This is my level of experience. This is the niche that I'm here to address with you today. And if you frame it properly, and anything that anybody asks you outside of that scope, that's an expectation from them. If I tell you, all right, we're gonna teach, we're gonna do Muay Thai today, and you ask me about double legs, maybe I know about double legs, maybe I don't, but that's not what we're doing today.
Right.
And if I was very explicit with, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is what I'm going to teach you, then I own that and I stick with it.
Right. If your firearms course is on building a better shooter, then you helping them find the exact right gun for them isn't part of the repertoire.
Look, you could do a 1-hour class on trigger press.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Boom. That's it. That's what we're doing. You're teaching, right? You're teaching this one thing, and now you're learning to teach. You're learning to transfer information. You're learning how to engage with other people. You're learning how to read body language. You're learning how to answer questions, and you're very myopic in what it is that you are there to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to scale it. So, on the mats for us and for the people we usually teach, they have a lineup of coaches. There's a hierarchy of sorts. There's somebody to shadow under. But if you are being your own coach or you're the owner and the instructor kind of deal, you're getting started, start with that small topic, record yourself teaching it even. Find those trusted individuals in your space that you can be like, hey, here's a couple clips of the course I taught and how I taught it and this type of thing. What do you think? What's your feedback? But of course, just post it on the internet and ask everybody.
Yeah, don't do that.
And don't do that. Anyone you would trust for advice, you can trust for their criticism or vice versa. Be specific and intentional with the people you reach out to.
And they don't even necessarily have to operate in that space, because there are plenty of people out there that don't know anything about firearms, but know how to speak, know how to teach, know how to transfer information, know how to engage with other people without knowing anything about firearms necessarily. Now, obviously, you can send it to firearm people that you know and trust, but you don't have to limit it to just that, because what is it that you're trying to get better at? Teaching.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So you need great teachers.
So if you have a pretty good understanding of the principles, the concepts, the techniques that you are going to teach, then it's less about that and more about the pedagogy of actually taking that information and translating it, transferring it to somebody else.
Well, this is why our courses include teachbacks as a component. As awkward as they feel, as weird as it is to teach somebody who already knows it, you can gain a lot from doing that, but also having them teach something that you already know to you. And that's part of why I love doing basic and fundamental type classes. And as I was coming up through the Fit to Fight space and instructor programs, I took as many level ones as I could get my hands on, because I loved hearing people say the same thing in a different way. That's so valuable to me as somebody who wants to be able to coach anyone who walks in the door.
I mean, my favorite courses are still the foundation level 1 coach courses. Those are still my favorites.
Why?
Why'd you say it like that?
I well, Ryan Hoover, why are those your favorite? I don't know. Who am I? What is going on here?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Because, I mean, it's way more about the coaching than it is about the moves and the movements. Once you get groups that have been coaching for a while, have been kind of through the program, they understand how to do this, that, and the other, then it becomes more about your foot being here and your arm being here and your head being here and these kinds of things, which is fine. I don't have a problem with those things. I mean, you have to do it, but I'm much more passionate and interested in the transfer of information, the knowledge of being able to get somebody that's never thrown a punch in their lives before and they're terrified of being here and whatever, and then getting them to hit that pad. And that process, that's what I enjoy the most. And getting other people to be able to do that is how we touch way more people, And so, and I do think there's a point where in coach courses especially, if they've never coached before, or if they've come from another system program or whatever, I love seeing light bulb moments when I'm talking about a concept or a principle or how we do things kind of perspective. I love seeing people be like, I never thought about that,
Yeah.
or that's why you do that, or, those kinds of moments. I love that. So, yeah.
It's funny because I feel like there's a big push just in this general space of building a business to start with why, not the book. Well, also the book, but this idea of owning your why for what you're doing.
Yeah.
You still have to let why lead when you're teaching fundamentals, movements, whatever it is, because if you're just telling it to them to tell it to them, or telling it to them because that's what you were told, it's inauthentic because you don't own that information. You don't truly understand it. And so it makes it harder to answer questions.
I think a great example of this is the way that, at least in America, a lot of academia is approached. Here's a math equation. Here's how we solve it. But why? Why do I need to know this? If you can explain to me how this is going to be relevant to my life or pertinent to my life, or why I need to know how to do this thing, I will have a much easier time, and I'll be much more engaged in learning it. Give me some context. Don't just, let's add some letters and numbers and split them on top of each other, and we'll add some little tiny numbers over the big numbers, and I'm like, well, okay, but why do I need to know this? Like, what are we doing? Like, why?
Well, just in case you have a career that you use these big numbers and little numbers and X's and squiggly lines.
But
no, I know.
Tell me why.
Yeah.
Like I would, me personally, at least, I would have fared much better in some of those types of classes if it wasn't just about the minutia of getting from this side of the equation to this side of the equation.
It's funny because there's a little bit of having to tell somebody where you're going before you start directing them is what you needed. Yep. And that's where, like, calculus. I still have you. Okay, good. So
that's the body language you're reading.
I mean, you didn't anyway. If you knew that, if you understood that what you were doing would ultimately lead to you finding out how tall you could build a roller coaster or how fast the roller coaster would accelerate at a certain degree, you'd be like, oh, okay, cool.
Yes.
But no one was doing that.
That's not hard to do. It's not hard
to say that. Yeah. No, it's not. But that's not how it's written in your manual and told in your book that you have to do it.
Right.
So again, if you don't have instructors, coaches, teachers, professors that care enough to help you understand the end so that you're more interested in the journey.
They don't understand.
Well, there's that too.
Because this is what I see in our space a lot. That's why people teach from manuals.
Yeah.
Because somebody else taught from a manual and they handed them this manual and they said, this is the way you do it. And so if I don't really understand, well, why do we do it this way? And I can't get outside of this formula, then I can't do the things that we're talking about.
Right.
I can't talk about roller coasters, because I don't understand how it fits.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, again, leading with starting with why. But, being able to still get your point across quickly, succinctly, especially, again, when we bring it back to on the mats, so that you're not giving an hour lecture on, how to disarm a gun when you really just wanted to look at a rising front kick or something, But that balance takes time to develop. And when you first start out, you're going to be on one side or another. You're going to tell them, okay, do this, go. And you're going to look around and you're going to be like, oh, that was not enough information. Or you're standing on your soapbox and you realize I've lost half a class because I couldn't get to the point quickly enough to get them working.
And that's where most you coaches, because you're trying to prove that you belong there. So you're pushing so hard in that direction. I'm going to tell you everything I know about this rising front kick, because that way you'll believe that I should be here, that I belong in this space,
Yeah. The history of it and
nobody cares.
How it relates to if you were using, whatever, a weapon, or how it developed. So we've talked about body language, communication, what you're saying, but also what you actually mean. What about communicating through music, for example? I do feel like this is actually, when I first started coaching, taking courses, and we talked about music and setting the pace and tone of your class through what you use, I don't think it was very prevalent, or maybe I just didn't have the tools to know it was very prevalent. But when I go to look up a playlist on Spotify to pull songs from, or whatever it might be, more and more there are classified by a a type of class like jujitsu playlist or whatever, and I can look in and really kind of decide if this person understands. Well, I can see what their goals are with the training.
Yeah.
If it's filled with heavy metal, they're hopefully looking to put people through the wall because that's likely an outcome. If it's got some jazz to it or random stuff, that is a little bit more low key, like I have an idea of what they're going for and that sort of thing. I feel like that's a relatively new shift in our world in the fight space.
Maybe in the broader sense, yeah. I mean, I think I've been very specific and intentional with the music that I play for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
As part of our level 1 coach course, we talk about this.
Yeah.
95% of the time, I'm choosing music based on the energy that I want in the room. And that's gonna come down to what am I teaching, not just what art or system or program, but what I'm teaching within that art or system or program. It comes down to, is it morning or is it evening? It comes down to what's the general makeup of the room. And then what are the goals of that particular class? Because like you said, if I'm teaching a sporology class and I know my last 10 to 15 minutes are going to be sparring, and the general direction I'm giving people is, you can, everything to the body and legs, you can kind of get after a good bit. Anything to the head should be a little touch, kind of show work. Be a good training partner, good technical skills, not trying to murder anybody. And then I play DMX.
Murder is the outcome.
I should have an expectation that 30 seconds into that round, they're going to forget everything I just said, because DMX is blasting all over my room, and immediately heart rates are going to go up, adrenal levels are going to go up, and so is the level of intensity in the room. Whereas I'll throw on classical music and it's going to match much more closely with the level of intensity that I'm looking for in the room. So
I'm going to put a poll. We're going to try it again. Spotify listeners, even on YouTube, comment, but you guys come through for me. If you use music intentionally in your classes, we want to know about it. Let us know.
And by the way, it's not just what you play, but it's the levels of the volume as well, right? Just like your voice should not be here the entire time you are teaching, because nobody will listen to you. It becomes white noise and nobody, yes. Your music should be the same, right? If I want you to listen and pay attention to the things that I'm saying, turn your music down. You trying to yell over your music is not conducive to learning at all. It just becomes noise. And so turn the music down when you want people to pay attention to you. And then when it's time for them to drill and you're not giving instructions for 2 or 3 minutes at a time, turn it back up. If it stays at the same level the whole time, it's just noise. It's no longer intentional. It's not serving a purpose.
And you can raise your voice or your volume to draw people in. You can lower it down. You can be quiet to draw people in.
Yes, but if you're yelling over music, that is not the way to do it.
No, especially if that's the entire class.
I mean, like if we're in sparring rounds and I'm going to yell out, a 3-word direction, that's fine. I'm not talking about I'm going to interrupt the whole class and go run and turn it down so I can say 3 words. But if I'm going to focus on a point that I want to make and it's going to take me 20, 30 seconds, turn the music down.
Yeah. I think this is maybe what gets me a little bit. So I'm still pretty new to the firearms world. Not necessarily new in that I haven't shot a lot. I feel like I've shot a good bit, by maybe enough to get me out of like the beginner group. But the language I don't understand yet, the terminology I don't have yet. And I really don't get a good read on, are we doing a drill? Are we going fast? Are we taking it easy? Because I'm listening through, ear pro the whole time. And I'm not sure if the instructor is about to shoot or not shoot or use a demo gun. And so kind of figuring that out, that whole world out, has been something for me. And mostly I've been in pretty fast moving experiences. So maybe when it's like a 2 or 3 day firearms course, it's a little bit more clear. But I do feel like that's a point of development for the firearms world if it's not out there, where it's very clear what the expectation is ahead of time, and understanding, when I'm going to keep talking, when we're about to go live, and you just need to listen for these specific words.
Well, and I think some of that is just there's a lack of uniformity.
Yeah.
Amongst instructors. I mean, that happens in our space too.
I was going to say,
if you do a a full day jujitsu seminar, and this dude is clapping on 3, but he's actually clapping on 4.
He says on 3, but you're clapping on 4, and I'm like, which are we doing?
This one is clapping, just ready, set, go. Like, and it's like, I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah,
and,
you're right. It is that, and my novelty to firearms makes it feel a little bit more important to be on task.
Well, yeah, because I mean, if somebody, like in our world, if somebody's not paying attention,
they're going to turn to their partner and be like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And it'll be okay.
Yeah. Nobody's going to get shot,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the stakes are higher for sure.
Yeah. I think so for me, trying to develop my abilities in coaching firearms, I've kind of laid out for myself the very specific terms I want to use, so that if I'm teaching in a on the mat environment with like a CERT next level training pistol, it's going to directly match what they can expect when we go to the range.
And I think not just what you say, but how you manage the line.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's like the same. If
those things should translate.
Yeah. And I feel crazy yelling line cold, line hot when we're inside with laser pistols, but I want that very clear expectation to be there.
Listen, if somebody is doing 70% dry fire to 30% range time, it's like we talk about in our space. If you're doing a lot more bag work, glove drills, mitt work than you are sparring, which is most everybody, then you want your bag work, mitt work, glove drills to translate for your sparring. So if I'm doing completely different things and developing completely different habits in the 75% of the time versus the 25% of the time, it defies logic that those things are going to somehow all of a sudden switch up for me in that 25% of the time. So if the goal, like with CERT pistols or whatever kind of inert you're using, if my goal is, okay, well, these people aren't used to training, they're not used to drawing, they're not used to trigger presses, they're not used to being on a live range, then why wouldn't I make it like a live range?
Yeah.
Now, obviously there are going to be drills that CERTs allow you to do that you can't do on a live range. But when you're working on like general marksmanship, those kinds of things, getting shots on target, your drawing, your grip, your trigger press, those kinds of things, where you're shooting at a paper target. I think it only makes sense that the things you say and the way you manage that line is the same as the way you would manage it for real, because now they don't have the same problem that you were talking about having. So we have one of these courses coming up in June, where we're going to do a day inside and a day outside. Well, if the day inside, and we've got a bunch of newer folks, the day inside, all of our commands, all the way that we move, all the way that we interact on the range, on the line, is different from day 1 to day 2. That's wasting time.
I was going to say, that's an unnecessary learning curve.
It's completely inefficient. It makes no sense. And it's frustrating as a student if I have to go from, well, last night
you said buy and go.
And now all of a sudden you're giving me a completely different cue. It's frustrating. And the whole point was to get me comfortable with being on a live range. And now, not only am I not comfortable, I'm uncomfortable and frustrated because what I thought I had just learned, I'm having to relearn.
Didn't transfer over.
It doesn't even have anything to do with shooting.
Right. We haven't gotten to the hard part yet. And I'm a details person. Like if you tell me right hand goes straight out and I'm watching you and your right hand goes a little bit off to the side, in my mind, I'm already stressing about which is it. Did it, or is it straight out, or did you mean a little to the side? And
that's like, that's another thing we talk about. You need to make sure that your words are matching your body. The things you're doing need to match the things that you're saying, because people learn differently. Some people are going to see what you are doing and maybe they hear a little bit of it, and then vice versa is going to happen. We've talked about this. For me, I just need to go do it. I've seen you do it a couple of times. I've heard the things you say, but I need to physically feel it for myself.
I am very visual, to the point where someone will ask me, was he bringing his left hand back? And I'll be like, oh, I don't know if he said it, but yeah, he did it. Or I'll be like, the second time he did it a little bit differently, but the first few times he did this. Well, like I don't know how I am that way, but I am that way.
Well, and from a coach's standpoint, it's important that we understand that people learn differently. You have to coach to all of them. And again, that's the difference between coaching and instructing, I think.
Instructing is
instructing. I'm doing it by the book, and the book says that I present this information in this manner.
It's more about you. This is what I am teaching. This is how I'm teaching it. And now it's on you to figure it out.
Yes.
And then that's why students have to go get, their groups to study in and their mentors and, TA time or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. I want to hit on one more idea before we close this out and thereby open it up to the next level of, we're going to do more on communication, I'm sure. And communication is everything. It's part of all of these episodes, but I want to talk about questions as communication tools because you are great at this, using questions to help students get to their own answers, or kind of like what I was talking about before with the firearms coach, understand what they're really asking.
Yeah. I understand that this method can be frustrating for people because generally speaking, as humans, we just want you to tell us, just give me the answer or tell me what to do or whatever it is. But if my goal is to actually transfer the information to you to where you actually own it, you're not just mimicking what I said or do, then I need to get you to the point of you being able to answer the question that I'm giving you because you had to think about it and figure it out. Now, if you can't, then that's fine. I can guide you to it.
Right.
But if it's just you ask me, is this red? And I say, yes, that's red. Do you actually know that it's red, or are you just saying it's red because I told you it's red?
Right. And then the next time you see one of these guys, if it's black, you're going to be like, well, it must be red because last time it was red. So
I think, whether you call it the Socratic method or, in some ways it's got an ecological approach to it. And we've already kind of touched on, I think it requires all of it.
Yeah.
But I truly believe that if it's something that people need to be able to take with them and truly understand it, they have to in some way get to it on their own. My job is to kind of be their Sherpa, but I'm not doing the hike for them. Right. I'm there to kind of guide them along the way and, offer some advice here and there. But it's like the map is not the journey kind of thing. The menu is not the meal, whatever. I'm there to kind of facilitate, this journey, but I don't want to do the journey for you. Yeah. It's not that I don't want to. I don't think that's the best way for you.
Yeah, that's not actually helpful to you.
Yeah, it's much easier for me, right, to just say, do this.
It would be like if you could work out and then give them the results and give them the weight loss or the muscle tone development, that kind of thing. And that's just not how it goes.
I program a workout for me and say, here, go do this.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about your goals. I don't know anything about what you've done before. I don't know your injuries. I don't know. It's the whole motivational quote thing. It's the same, right? Yeah. Like,
I don't know you.
I mean, well, this worked for me, so boom, here, it'll go work for you. That's just not how things work.
What was it? The most dangerous person to learn how to deal with a gunfight is somebody who's just been in a gunfight. Yeah. Just because it worked for you in that one instance.
Right. Listen, I years ago, I was doing some work for a magazine, and I flew out to interview a person that had been in a shootout outside of a nightclub. And on the surface, it was a really interesting story. And I spent a whole weekend at this place. And I went to a martial arts place to train with this person. I went to a gym to train with this person. I went to a range to train with this person. And I left there and decided that I couldn't write this article because I came to the conclusion that it was absolute, just pure luck. There was success in this event, and that it could not ever be replicated the way that it happened. And so I didn't write the article because I felt like it would be completely disingenuous unless I came at it from the kind of the mindset of, look, this is what happened. I don't think this is repeatable. I don't think you could ever teach somebody to do this. If there is a teachable moment here, it's that the fact that this person acted.
Yeah.
Beyond that, this was straight garbage because
facts of what had happened. Glad it came out okay.
Yes.
Lots of room for improvement.
I was terrified at the range.
I remember.
Absolutely terrified.
I remember. So it's funny because in terms of using questions as communication tools too, We do this everywhere from the front desk of the gym into the classes to understand where people are going from and what their goals are and what their needs are. And if we tie that back into your experience with this person, I don't think they ever went to the range or went to their gym or went to their martial arts center and explained, this is what I do, this is what I need, or what I think I need maybe to operate. They went in there and they wanted self-defense or to get stronger or to put let down range. And that maybe it's on her. For sure, some of it's on her, but a lot of it too is on the people who are guiding her, training her to understand what it is she actually needs. And so if you let somebody come in and say, oh, I want to learn self-defense, and you say, okay, cool, here's our self-defense classes, you've missed a lot.
Yeah, because I would say 80% of the people that show up at our centers have no idea what they actually want.
That part.
They don't know.
They have no idea.
I want to do kickboxing. Oh, do you?
Are you sure? No, it's boxing that people say they want to do. And I'm like, I bet you don't. Go to a boxing gym.
They want a heavy bag class.
Yeah.
You know, which is fine. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. But they don't know. And if you don't ask them, you're going to stick them into a sparring class, and now they're getting punched and kicked, and they're like, whoa, this is not what I came for.
Yep.
You know, and that's on us.
Or they say they've have kickboxing experience. And so you put them in that class and you find out that they've done 9 rounds for 3 months. Yeah. And there's a trainer there that held some mitts for them and told them they were doing kickboxing or whatever it is. You've got to be curious, genuinely curious, if you care. And again, dig on why.
Right. Yep.
All right. I'm going to end this with a quote. People don't hear what you mean. They hear what you say. And that's from Ryan Hoover, probably. I feel like you say, I'll say something and you'll say it back to me and I'll be like, that's not what I meant. And you'll be like, that's what I said. Yeah, that's where that quote came from. So there you go.
Yeah, because you're one of these people, you take things very literally when they are said to you.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
And I know we don't have time now, but at some point you talked about kind of being able to read between the lines or whatever. You are terrible at that.
Thanks. I know.
That's not a real thing for you.
Nope.
And so from a coaching standpoint, you can't afford to teach in that way.
Yeah.
You know, not from our perspective, where people can get hurt.
Yep.
There's no reading between the lines. You have to be very specific about, this is what the guidelines are. These are the rules. These are restrictions. These are isolations, whatever. Because there are people like you in your room that they're only going to hear what you said verbatim, and there's no nuance to it.
Yep. 100%. It's me.
Oh, I know.
I'm the problem.
I am well aware.
How does that duality exist in me where I don't read between the lines? But anyway, okay. That's our look at coaching beyond the surface. If you enjoyed this discussion, please leave us 5 stars, follow, share, subscribe. Remember to interact with the poll on Spotify, leave some comments on YouTube. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, overreact by commenting on everything we've ever posted. Talk about this guy in your comments, please. And if you're listening to this, you need to see the video. Check out what we've got going on here. Thanks for listening to Second Plan A, and we look forward to growing with you next time.
It's Richie Rich comics, which is super weird. Thanks, everybody.